It started with a storm, the kind that rattles windows and sends fingers of lightning clawing at the sky. The attic had been leaking for weeks, and my mother had been on my case about fixing it. I didn't want to, but after she threatened to cut the Wi-Fi, I had no choice. The air up there was thick with dust, the scent of old wood and forgotten things curling in my nostrils. Boxes stacked like tombstones lined the narrow space, their corners softened with time. My flashlight flickered as I picked my way through, searching for the leak. That's when I saw it. An old radio. It sat atop a crate, covered in a thick sheet that looked like it hadn't been disturbed in years. I don't know why I was drawn to it, but my hands moved on their own, peeling the sheet away to reveal its black, metallic surface. The dials were rusted, the speaker grill dented, but something about it called to me. I knelt beside it, brushing away the cobwebs. My fingers hesitated over the power switch. The storm rumbled overhead, sending a tremor through the attic floor. I turned it on. A burst of static filled the air, loud enough to make me flinch. The speaker crackled, white noise flooding the space. But beneath it, something else. Whispers. They were faint, barely audible at first, a chorus of hushed voices speaking in frantic, overlapping tones. I leaned in, my pulse quickening. "Help me," a voice whispered. My breath caught in my throat. The static surged again, swallowing the voice. I adjusted the dial, searching for a clear signal, but all I got were more whispers, frantic and broken. My stomach churned. Then suddenly, silence. And then, "I've been waiting for you," the voice was clear. Too clear. As if someone were standing right behind me. I spun around, my flashlight beam slicing through the dark. Nothing. Just the same dusty attic, the same abandoned relics. The radio let out a high-pitched screech. The sound sent an icy bolt through my spine. I scrambled to turn it off, but the knob wouldn't budge. The static roared, then cut out abruptly, and the attic went still. Something cold brushed the back of my neck. A breath. I wasn't alone. I froze. The breath on my neck was real. It was warm, heavy, too human to be a draft. My skin prickled as I whipped around, my flashlight shaking in my grip. The attic was empty, but I wasn't alone. The air felt wrong, thick like it was pressing in on me. The radio was silent now, the dials still, but I knew it had spoken. Something had spoken. I reached out hesitantly and turned the knob again. The static returned in a whisper, crackling softly. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. Then another voice. Not frantic. Not pleading. Calm. Cold. Certain. "You should not have turned it on." I recoiled, nearly knocking over a stack of boxes. My heart pounded in my chest. The voice wasn't distorted like a normal radio transmission. It was crisp, clear, as if someone were speaking directly to me through the speaker. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. My fingers trembled over the dial. Turn it off. Turn it off now. "I see you." I lunged for the power switch. Before I could reach it, the attic light exploded with a sharp pop. Glass rained down, the space plunging into darkness. My flashlight flickered wildly as I scrambled backward, my breath coming in sharp gasps. The radio let out a shrill, ear-piercing whine. Then beneath the screech, something moved. A slow, deliberate shuffle. Something was in here with me. I swung the flashlight around, my pulse hammering against my ribs. The beam wavered across the attic floor, across boxes, rafters, shadows stretching and contorting in the dim light. Then I saw it. At first I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. A figure crouched in the far corner, half hidden behind an old tattered sheet. It was too still, as if waiting. The breath caught in my throat. Then slowly, too slowly, it moved. It stood up. The flashlight shook violently in my grasp as I aimed it toward the thing in the corner. My stomach clenched. There was nothing there. Just the sheet, gently swaying. The attic was silent again, except for my ragged breathing. My hands were ice cold. I turned back to the radio, reaching for the power switch again. A hand grabbed my wrist. I screamed. The flashlight fell from my grip, spinning as it hit the floor. The beam flashed wildly across the attic, catching glimpses of something. A shape, a face, too quick to see clearly. I ripped my arm away and stumbled back, my foot catching on a loose floorboard. My body pitched backward, and for one sickening moment, I thought I was going to fall straight through the attic floor. I hit the ground hard. The attic door slammed shut, and the radio spoke one final time, whispering in a voice that was so close to my ear, I could feel the breath of it against my skin. "You can't leave." I scrambled to my feet, my breath coming in sharp, panicked gasps. The attic was black as pitch, the only light coming from my fallen flashlight, its beam flickering weakly where it had rolled beneath a stack of boxes. The attic door was closed. I hadn't shut it. My skin prickled with cold sweat. The radio still sat on the crate, silent now. But the voice, that last whisper, it had been right next to me. I forced myself to move, lunging for the flashlight. My fingers curled around it just as I heard it. A slow creak of floorboards from behind me. Something was still here. I spun around, aiming the flashlight wildly. The beam landed on the sheet in the far corner, the same sheet that had swayed before. It was different now. It was hanging. I blinked. No, not hanging. It was lifting. The fabric peeled upward as if something beneath it was standing, rising. My breath hitched, every muscle in my body locking into place. My mind screamed at me to run, but I couldn't tear my eyes away. Then it dropped. Nothing was underneath, but the floor creaked again, closer this time. I backed toward the attic door, fumbling for the knob. My fingers gripped it tightly. I twisted, yanked, locked. The radio crackled. Then a voice. It was different now, lower, distorted, like something wet was caught in its throat. "You can't leave," it whispered again. I banged on the door. "Mom! Dad!" My voice was hoarse, shaking. "Someone open the door!" No response. Just the static. Then beneath the crackling, a faint sound. A laugh. Low. Guttural. Wrong. I whirled back to the attic, my flashlight beam darting frantically over the space. Empty boxes. Cobwebs? Shadows stretching, shifting. The sheet lay still again. But something was moving in the dark. The flashlight flickered. I held my breath. A hand shot out from behind a stack of boxes. Rotten. Gray. Fingers curling, reaching for me, I screamed. The radio shrieked with me, the static bursting into an agonized wail. The hand lunged. I threw myself backward against the attic door, my heart slamming against my ribs. The fingers brushed my ankle, ice cold and slick like raw meat. I kicked hard. The thing hissed. The flashlight flickered again, and for a single horrifying second I saw it. A face. Sunken. Hollow. Stretched too wide in a grin that should not be. And then darkness. The flashlight died, and something grabbed my throat. My scream barely made it out before the grip tightened. Ice-cold fingers dug into my throat, pressing, squeezing. My legs kicked wildly, my heels scraping against the attic floor as I fought to breathe. The weight of the thing pressed against me, pinning me down. My hands clawed at its arms, thin, sinewy, too strong. The flashlight was dead. The attic was pitch black, but I could feel it. Its breath, hot and putrid, washed over my face. My lungs screamed for air as its fingers dug deeper, harder, tightening. Then a burst of static from the radio. The grip on my throat loosened. A second voice, a different one, crackled through the speaker, urgent, desperate. "Run!" I didn't hesitate. I shoved against the thing with everything I had. My fingers sank into its flesh, too soft, too damp, like something that had been left to rot. It let out a shrill, inhuman screech, retreating just enough for me to roll away. My chest heaved as I scrambled to my feet, my hands shaking so badly I could barely move. The attic door, still locked. The flashlight, still dead. The darkness shifted. It was still here. I bolted for the radio. Somehow I knew it was the key. The static was still crackling, but the voices had stopped. I grabbed the knob, twisting it wildly, searching for something, anything. The whispers returned. Fast, frantic, overlapping. Some begging, some screaming, some laughing. And then one voice cut through the noise. A woman's voice. Soft. Familiar. "Turn it to 2.14. My breath caught. That voice. I knew it. I shouldn't have known it. My hands trembled as I turned the dial. The static faded. Silence. Then a sharp guttural scream. The thing behind me wailed in agony. The attic shook violently, the floorboards groaning, the air turning thick with the stench of decay. I spun around just as the darkness collapsed in on itself. A mass of writhing, clawing limbs, its face contorted in fury, in pain. It was being pulled away, back into the radio. I watched, frozen, as its body folded inward, shrinking, twisting until only its face remained, eyes wide, mouth stretched too far open in a silent scream. Then gone. The attic was silent. The air was still. The only sound was my ragged breathing. And then the radio whispered, "You freed it." My stomach turned to ice. I stepped back. The dial moved on its own. The static returned. And the woman's voice, the one I knew, the one I shouldn't have known, spoke again. "But you let something else out." A single sharp knock echoed from beneath the attic floor. Then another, and another. Something was knocking. From inside the house. The knocking didn't stop. It was slow, deliberate, coming from directly beneath me. My pulse pounded in my ears as I backed away from the radio, my mind screaming at me to run. But then, a voice. Soft. Familiar. "Don't be afraid." It was the same woman's voice from before, the one who had told me to turn the dial. The one I recognized but couldn't explain. The static crackled again, and then the attic door unlocked. I didn't hesitate. I lunged for the knob, threw the door open, and stumbled down the ladder, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The hallway was empty, the house eerily quiet. But the knocking, it was still coming. From downstairs. I forced my legs to move, racing toward the sound. The closer I got, the more something inside me told me that I needed to open that door. I reached the basement entrance. The knocking had stopped. For a moment, I hesitated. Then with a deep breath, I turned the knob. The basement was dark, the air thick with dust and time. My flashlight still wouldn't work, but as I stepped forward, a faint glow flickered from somewhere deep inside. And then I saw her. A woman stood in the center of the room, surrounded by broken radio parts, wires, and shattered glass. Her long, pale hands trembled at her sides, her expression unreadable. But her eyes were just like mine. My breath caught. Because I knew her, even though I had never seen her before in my life. "Mom?" The word left my lips before I even understood why. She smiled, a sad, knowing smile. "You remembered me?" My knees nearly buckled. "That thing," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper, "trapped me here, used the radio to keep me buried. But you set me free." Tears burned at my eyes. My mom had died when I was a baby. I had no memories of her, just old photographs, fading stories. But standing here in front of her, I knew the truth. She had never really been gone. She had been waiting. The house groaned as the walls shuddered around us. The air felt lighter now, warmer. The darkness in the corners of the room began to fade. She reached out, her hand hovering just inches from mine. "I can finally go now," she whispered. My chest tightened. I didn't want her to leave. I wanted more time. A lifetime of questions, of missed moments. I wanted all of it back. She seemed to read my thoughts and gave a gentle shake of her head. "You're safe now. That thing, it can't hurt you anymore. But something else is coming." I swallowed hard. "What?" She didn't answer. Instead, she stepped closer, placing her hand over mine. And for the first time in my life, I felt my mother's touch. Warm. Real. Full of love. A single tear slid down her cheek. "Live your life," she whispered. "And whatever happens, don't turn the radio on again." I barely had time to nod before her form began to fade, soft light swallowing her like mist in the morning sun. And then she was gone. The house settled into silence. The radio in the attic crackled one last time. Then it went dead. I never touched it again. I never even went back into the attic. But sometimes, late at night, when the wind howled and the house creaked, I would hear something, not whispers, not screams, just a voice, soft, familiar, humming me to sleep.